Hey everyone, I've made several videos that I have yet to post at this time. This is for the South Carolina Gates, where, you have families and men and women alike have went through family court abuse. My situation started out as I reported a crime. I reported a disclosure that my child had made to me from arriving home from an overnight visit with her father. Okay. I honestly did not know what to do. I sat back very disturbed, shocked. So anyway, I finally go to law enforcement after my child had disclosed criminal sexual conduct, first degree, to multiple people. In the beginning, I didn't want to believe it. I mean, you believe you know somebody, and it's really hard to bring yourself to the comprehension that this is real. So finally, I feel like it took a lot of courage, and honestly, I had to allow my child to go to sleep to record my video. I go and I disclose to law enforcement the minor report that my child had give to me and give to her adult siblings. She had also given it to a friend of the family that was an adult. She'd also given it to a minor sibling at that point. The report in itself was very limited, very, very limited, because I had no idea how to ask questions about such a topic that I had never dealt with. I've had 4 children, and it was just not a topic that I'd had ever had to address, and the shock was real. So following the day that she disclosed to me, she showed age inappropriate sexual behaviors. She was raw in her vaginal private area in between. Yes, my biggest regret is not going immediately to the Greenville Memorial Hospital system. That's my biggest regret. So, after, so many times of disclosing to not just me, but to siblings, that should have been, statements the police would have wanted from the ones that she disclosed to, but no, never once did they want a disclosure from no one. Okay, yes, I did fail to report this because it was so hard to comprehend that someone that I knew since middle school was capable of such. So anyhow, I finally filed my report with law enforcement, and you know, for early on, it seemed very awkward that law enforcement didn't want to speak with me, or that I called Julia Valentine Center and I asked them if I can get my daughter in sooner because the law enforcement center had scheduled my child for a forensic interview. I believe it was almost 3 to 4 weeks from the time I had made my report. And when I asked the investigating officer if I could take my daughter, as I did not know it was my right to do so, to the Julie Valentine Center, if I could get her in sooner, they became kind of aggravated and agitated with me. I didn't understand why. You know, I thought, you know, heck, the child's 3 years old. Don't we need to move faster? So, 3 weeks to 4 weeks later, we go to a forensic interview. The only thing I know to tell my child is that we're going to go play. Because usually at these kind of places and this kind of therapy, they have play therapy. And so that's why I said, you know, to her that, you know, you can go and you can play and, you know, because I was told not to speak to my child about it. And so I didn't speak to my child about it. I let her speak to me, or I would let her demonstrate the age inappropriate sexual behavior, and I would kind of correct her in a very nice manner. Well, as time went on, we have this 8 to 10 minute forensic interview where my child was removed from me. She was removed from everyone she knew, taken into a room. She'd never been left with strangers, not one day in her life, and she wanted out of that room. So she was allowed out of that room after 8 to 10 minutes of no explanation of why we're taking you from mom or why we have you in this room full of strangers. And in 8 to 10 minutes, they let her out of the room. Case closed, unfounded. Okay. The disclosure was very limited, is all I'm going to say. Okay. I try to get my daughter into the counseling at this same place that gave this forensic. Okay. I was denied initial counseling for my daughter. I have proof of that. And I have proof that it took another lady persisting that my child get into counseling with the lead director of this rape crisis center. Okay, we get in there. My daughter finally counsels. I am only in one session, and in one session's time, an object is disclosed of what my child has been molested with. Okay, as time went on, my child was brought in weekly. Okay, as time went on, my child was disclosing multiple objects that she was molested with. Okay, the counselor did not immediately file a report. And the only thing that I'd ever heard my child say was about the first object used to molest. not the second object and not the third object. She never mentioned those to me. So to say if it happened, I don't know, because as time went on, the first counselor, asked law enforcement for a forensic interview. She explained to my child that, Mommy's not leaving you, and I'm not going to leave you. We're going to just be right out here, and Mommy will sit on the couch, how she always does. Okay. The law enforcement center refused this forensic interview. My daughter did not disclose anything in the 8 to 10 minute forensic, so she didn't speak. So why would it be refused? Anywho, after this first counselor speaks to law enforcement, suddenly the way she speaks of me in her reports is obvious that something just isn't right. She started, at first she talked about how wonderful my child was dressed and da-da-da-da-da, and she spoke of, how I was doing absolutely amazing with my child, and, she seemed to understand that, my daughter didn't have a great sleep routine after all that had happened. But in her paperwork, no, she worded it like, the child came in with her shoes on the wrong feet. The child comes in sickly. Yes, my child had been sick in I can't remember how many sessions, almost 2 months of sessions. She was sick for about 3 weeks of those sessions. And, not sick enough to say, like, that she wasn't contagiously sick. She was sick. And so she didn't look the greatest, and she didn't look perfect at every session. But that wasn't my concern. My concern was taking my daughter to counseling. Yes, my daughter might have flipped her shoes to put them on the wrong feet, or my child wasn't sleeping greatly after all this had happened. But the way this counselor worded it, after speaking very highly of me, was like I was nothing but trash, and I wasn't providing my child with proper care. Suddenly, okay, my daughter finally, after over 3 months, gave a non-genuine recant to me at my home. I did not wait. I contacted DSS. I contacted law enforcement. I didn't contact the counselor because, at that time I didn't know how my daughter was going to respond in the next session. I contacted law enforcement, and I told them of the recant that Julie Valentine Center explained was not genuine. She did not take back everything that she had said. She was apologizing for the accused. Anyhow, I don't know, the police department and DSS both closed the case. So this is the second unfounded case. Okay, so then my daughter goes to another session with the first counselor. At this point in time, I didn't even tell the counselor because I wanted to see my daughter's response. And my daughter went in, and she wasn't discussing it, and she said didn't happen, So she was giving her non-genuine recant to the counselor that called it a full recant, which I already knew better. I'd already talked to the Julie Valentine Center, which told me differently. the counselor began talking about my own son in a very negative manner towards my daughter. And the thing is, my daughter had never spoke badly of her own brother. Never, not once. Okay, so next thing I know, DSS is at my oldest daughter's school without me even knowing and on my doorsteps. And they tell me that an allegation is made against my son that had just went and slit my ex's tires for the disclosure his sister made against my ex. So I'm sitting on the porch with DSS and they bring a law officer to my home. Not one of them would look me in the eyes. Every one of them was looking down at the ground with their allegations against my son. So I say, okay. And they tell me I ask them to come on in. So they tell me, no, we don't want to come in. We don't want this ever spoke about around the child. So I was like, okay, that's fine with me. So over the next 2 to 3 days, when my daughter brings up the fact that when the accused draws on her private area, it tickles and it's fun. And I explained to her that I understood that it tickled and it was fun, but it was still wrong. So I contact law enforcement by email because none of them would talk to me. I contacted DSS by email. I told them, I said, I'm finally learning that not all sexual abuse is meant to hurt, obviously. And told them that my child said that when her vaginal area was drawed on, that it tickled and it was fun. And she acted like she enjoyed that. So, sadly enough, my child didn't know any better. But he did. Okay, law enforcement and DSS, neither one contacted me back. Case was closed. Case was unfounded. Period. Okay. So, after the first counselor, I feel had made a false allegation against my son, which obviously is what it was. They never came to my home, or they never asked me to come for a forensic interview for my child against the allegation they made against my son. They never did anything whatsoever but fake close the report. The reason they did so, well, they said my son couldn't be around my daughters until the case was closed. The caseworker came to my home and said the case was closed, okay? I never received paperwork stating that. And so what I concluded was that, okay, my son's in jail because he slit my ex's tires, and I finally figured out in my brain that I do have, DSS had not sent the report saying that the case was closed. I mean, heck, they didn't do anything. And if you would have read the report, which I do have, there's nowhere in that report that could even say that my son sexually abused my daughter. But they said he did. but they did nothing to follow up on it. So anyhow, I demanded the report that they said they closed in my hands that day. Because my son was coming home in like 3 days. And so, no. The DSS report was not closed. Not on a piece of paper. So what their intentions was for my son to get out of jail, return home, me not have a signed documented paper from their office saying, case closed. And they were going to come in and take my children from me. But it didn't work out that way. Because I went and I said, I need that paper in my hand today. So, obviously, the Post had something to do with that as well. One reason I know this is because of parts of the report. And I know the only person that would have said I was protective of my son is the accused. So anyhow, aside from DSS being a part of the colluded act in my case, I watched law enforcement refuse to talk to me. The solicitor's office refused to talk to me. The sheriff would not have any contact with me. And I probably made 20, 30 requests over the whole time frame, which was a good, it might have been 40 requests. I don't know, but it was over a long, long time period. No callbacks. No, yes, we'll meet with you. No, nothing. So, the one investigating officer that was handling it turned it over to the lead, or one of the head investigators, because he didn't want no part of this, because he couldn't deal with, I guess, what they were doing, is what I think. Maybe he could, maybe he just didn't feel like it, maybe he knew it was wrong, I don't know. I never got explanations. So, I hired 2 lawyers. My first lawyer, he failed to inform me of a hearing that was going to cost me the temporary custody of my daughter. And the opposed lawyer and my ex had it written to where, had I not shown up for this hearing, I would be in default. And they would take temporary custody of my child. A child that he had never proven even paternity to. Still hasn't to this day. We were unmarried. DSS told me, you don't have to let him see that child. Go into a courtroom, my lawyer just sits there. He never even asked for child support, even though the ex did sign the birth certificate. He did have a duty to support the child, which he didn't for almost a year. He neglected fully, willfully, and intentionally to cause distress and hardship in my life. That was what that was about. So my first lawyer, didn't get child support, and he failed to inform me of a hearing that was colluded together to cause me to lose my daughter. And yes, I have proof of it. By the grace of God, I located this hearing on the roster that they was not going to tell me about. I get to that hearing. I get upstairs. I walk to the courtroom door because I knew the opposed attorney was not there yet. After he came stepping up them steps, and I heard him say in an odd way, "Is she here?" He said that to the opposed. "Is she here?" Oh my goodness. I knew then that he knew that I wasn't going to be informed. So that was their first attempt to take my child that this man, number one, had no rights to legally. He was given supervised visitation. No child support was ever set up for almost a year either, and I was not allowed to request a paternity test before he got visits like DSS said I could. Never happened. Thing is, when the counselor gave her report, she reported objects used. This is before the non-genuine recant. Police still had no probable cause, obviously, even though she was stating objects used to molest my daughter. But police never done anything to protect and serve me or my child. Neither did either attorney that I hired. I believe after a child that's 3 years old discloses consistently for over 3 months, I believe they finally get to a point, it seems, that they just get tired of talking about it. Even if they still say things that let you know that it happened, like it tickled and it was fun. Okay, the child doesn't understand she was molested. The police don't care that she was molested. They couldn't care less. Why wasn't the people that she disclosed to ever asked for a statement? It's beyond my understanding. So my report closes after 8 to 10 minute forensic that took 3-4 weeks to get. No medical forensic was ever set up for over 3 months. Over 3 months. Logical? I think not. A non-genuine recant closed the first counselor's report that stated three different objects used to molest my child. Closed on a non-genuine recant. Suddenly, let's see, that false report came in on my son, and nothing was done. I mean, it was their way to make me shut my mouth about the accused. That's all it was. They colluded together and filed a false allegation against my son. Then, in the system, it is put in the system that he was arrested actually a month later than he really was. And there's another person's picture up with my son's name. The guy's last name is Ramey. My son's last name I won't state. Okay, I had filed a report shortly after I had filed the report where my child had disclosed criminal sexual conduct first degree. I filed another report because my older daughter, that my ex had helped me terminate the parental rights to her biological father, and he always said he would support her, and now he don't support her, and he barely supports ours or whatever. Anyhow, I tried to file a report that my older daughter told me about happening, where this man had beat her while I was gone to the grocery store. He beat her until she urinated on herself. And my child decided not to tell me this until she knew that he couldn't come back to the home after the CSC first degree report was made. And she asked me, "Mama, can he come back to the house?" When I said no, she told me about him beating her, and she didn't think he was going to stop. So I go to law enforcement. They refused that report and said spankings are not illegal. And it's been almost a year? Yeah, I'm just now learning about this abuse. Anyhow, it was another way to help protect him. So, probable cause didn't matter. And let me see what else has happened in almost 2 years. It's hitting 2 years now. Okay, I hired my second lawyer after my first lawyer decided that he was gonna work for my post. I mean, heck, more money in it. I hired a lawyer. He's named one of the best in America. This lawyer never once served me, his client, or protected my child. The opposed had once told me, "Money will win. I'm backed 100 until the end." And you should know this by now.